Hi guys, it's me, Mrs. Snook. How are you today? So this was really for our A-Day class. It's the 17th today, and this was really meant for my A-Day class since today is a remote learning day. If tomorrow ends up being a remote learning day, then I'll expect that B-Day will listen to this video as well and kind of watch it. So I'm just going to do some notes here about what was happening in America before the Civil War began. And if you think back to when I saw you guys last week, we did that KWL chart. Remember about what you already know, what you want to know, and what you learned about the Civil War. And I said at the end of, the unit, we would go ahead and we would talk about what you had learned about the Civil War. And so we'll go back and we'll fill in the rest of that KWL chart at that point in time. And, for now, you already have a little bit of background knowledge about the Civil War, but we said that, we need to kind of review some of this stuff because it's been a while since you've talked about the Civil War and who the major leaders were and what the battles were and why it started and really kind of what happens after. 8th grade was a long time ago. So our notes today are called antebellum. Okay, so antebellum refers to the period of time before the Civil War. We're going to be specifically looking at what was happening in America between 1820 up to 1860 when the war begins and Abraham Lincoln gets elected. Now, these are the long-term causes of the Civil War. Once we get to the late 1850s, those are going to be more so the short-term causes of the Civil War. It's really up to you guys how you want to take your notes. If you remember, I told you that you can use notes on your quiz and on your test, and so it's going to be totally up to you about how you want to take those notes. I suggest that as we go through this video, this lecture, that there's a couple of slides in particular where I said, write this down. This information is important. You're going to need to know it. You're going to need to understand it for your upcoming quizzes and tests. Some of the other slides are important to understanding the whole story, to getting the full picture of what was happening in America. But if you don't want to write it all down, that's okay. If you want to take the option of printing it out and highlighting it and having it, that's okay too. But I'm just telling you, you don't need to necessarily write down every slide. I realize it'll make your hand cramp and it's just a lot of information to kind of consume. So let's get into it here. So this slide, if you notice, I wrote down, copy down this page. This page is clearly important. And so what we're getting at is what are the causes of the Civil War in the long term? And I'm just realizing that the very last line got cut off. So I'm going to have to try to move down my screen just a little bit. Yep, it looks like it worked. Like I said, I'm still kind of a newbie when it comes to making videos here. Starting to get better, I'm hoping, but I don't know about that. So let's talk about it. Whenever we're talking about causes or effects, we want to always look at the political, the economic, and the social factors which led to an event happening. And we also want to talk about then, of course, the political, economic, and social impacts that come after the event occurred. So during the period of time between 1820 and 1860, there was a lot of tension in America between the North and the South. And politically, this tension was really over who has the power, who has the control, who gets to decide what happens in America when it comes to decision making. Now, once you get to be a junior and you take government or AP government, you're going to learn about a concept called federalism, which really is about the true division of power. And this issue constantly came up in the antebellum period. The South believed in a concept known as states' rights, where they felt that they had control over their own local government, their state government, and that the federal government really didn't apply to them. It couldn't tell them what to do. You have to understand that at this point in history, America was very different. Okay? We did not have a federal income tax at this point. People did not gain Social Security. They were not required to have any kind of health care. So really and truly, the government had less of an impact on your lives. Now, Northerners, though, on the other hand, felt that for the most part that the federal government was supreme. They believed that it had ultimate authority over the states, and it could tell the states what, they could do whatever that they told them to do, and you had to follow the rules. You think about your own family life. Who's in charge in your household? Is it you, or is it your mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or whoever your guardian may be that you live with? This is an issue of power. And if you ask people in the South, even to this day, as you look at some of their textbooks, some people may say that the Civil War was caused because of this issue of federalism, of supremacy over who had the true power. Now, another issue that was really a potential conflict at this point in history was economic issues. And the economy in the North versus South had been long divided for a long period of time. In the North, the economy was based on manufacturing. Vast majority of Americans had jobs in factories. It's not to say that some people were not small farmers, but especially in the New England area, the soil was rocky. They never had been able to, really make a go of it as far as big farms. Now, you have to understand that at this point, the Midwest, was in a sense some of the West. They were first expanding in the 1820s at least, slowly but surely into Illinois and into Iowa. And over time, into Missouri, and then later it's going to be out into California. So more of the farming area that we're accustomed to wasn't something that people, in the North, so to speak, were, used to. So a lot of them had manufacturing-based jobs. Even women possibly worked and, worked in, garment factories. Whereas the South, of course, has always been based on farming. And many Southerners grow what we call cash crops at this point in history. So things like cotton, okay, or tobacco, things that they're going to have miles and miles of land devoted to the same crop so they can sell it and have a huge profit. And of course, they have slaves doing the vast amount of this labor. Even as Eli Whitney, of course, came out with cotton gin, they're still relying on slave labor to produce these goods. And there are very few railroads at this point. Many people in the South have private roads or toll roads, and they use horses, and they often live near waterways, and they ship goods around from this, from one portion of the South to another, or they even ship their goods overseas to England when it comes to cotton and such. But they're not really relying on farming. And of course, the big issue that causes the Civil War in the long term is, of course, slavery, okay? And we know that people who believe that slavery is morally wrong, they're known as abolitionists. And you have white abolitionists, you have former slave African-American abolitionists, people who are going to be talking about the terrible time that slaves have in terms of being beaten and raped and not allowed to have their own name and, not allowed to have any kind of education, any kind of free time. Their children are often taken from them and sold, right, at auction. Families are separated. You have, no sense of family life. Things could be better depending on the slave owner of a plantation or if it was a small farm or home that someone worked in. But for the most part, slavery was terrible. And so most people in the North are abolitionists, and they believe that slavery is morally wrong. They help for years, to help people escape. Some people become active members of the Underground Railroad, right? Which, if you think back to 8th grade, it is not, of course, a railroad that is magically underground. It is, of course, a railroad, so to speak. It's just a way for people to escape as they, sneak away from farms and plantations in the middle of the night. And they go to people's homes who have the light on the front porch, and they hide in their cellar. They hide in their attic. They hide anywhere they can, and they stow away in hopes to get to Canada for a better life. And of course, Harriet Tubman, one of the most famous escaped slaves that helps other slaves to escape year after year, helping thousands to escape over time. Now, most people in the South, you might find a few abolitionists, but most people in the South tend to view slavery as property, as chattel, as no different than, a cow or a horse. It's an incredibly racist, terrible viewpoint. And they believe in this system, that they are somehow racially superior to Black people, and that it's okay to treat them in this manner. And they've convinced themselves of this because, of course, they use slaves for profit, to make money so they don't have to do the work themselves or hire anyone else. And as time goes on and America expands further west, they become terrified that the U.S. government is going to limit their ability to have slaves and is eventually going to end slavery. So what we're seeing here is that this feeling of sectionalism is spreading throughout America, where some people are starting to feel that, their just way of life is completely different. That to be a Northerner, to be a member of the true Union, you work in a factory, you might live in a city, you might have a small farm, you think slavery is completely wrong, and you think the federal government has ultimate power. compared to someone in the South who, lives a very rural lifestyle, lives in a small town or out in the country by themselves. They don't believe that the federal government can tell them what to do, and they believe that they are superior in every way, shape, and form to all African Americans, and they want them enslaved, and they think that they're better than free blacks. Not that there are few free blacks in the South. It's a division over time. So make